Massaggio. Money. Power. I'm better than you. Massaggio. So today I'm going to show you how to build a simplified version of Blackjack using only connected content and liquid. It deals 2 cards to each player, determines the values of those cards, and then determines the winner from that. It even has a sassy dealer. My original goal was to teach you how to do some clever things with connected content and use an API that didn't require a login. Next thing you know, I'm building a backyard casino. So to build this, I use the in-app message drag and drop editor and a single content block because I like to keep things simple for my people, you guys. The connected content call and most of the liquid is housed within inside the content block to keep things looking clean, but you could build this in the custom HTML section of the drag and drop editor if you just like complete chaos. Here's my in-app message layout. There's nothing too fancy here. I have a row at the top that has our company's logo. I custom made this gem of a logo, Braze, not in any way representing a famous brand that I've heard of. You can leave this top logo row out if you like because it won't actually break anything. Next there is a small gap which is actually the row that contains the content block of connected content code. Next is a row for your title, the player, then a row with 2 images side by side, these are our cards. Follow this with a spacer and another row of 2 images, the dealer's cards. And finally there is a row with a single image of the dealer telling us who won. Here's what the template looks like inside the editor so you can rip it off and get massively wealthy. Apart from the content block with the connected content and the liquid and the 2 rows with images in them, you could ditch the rest and still get this going. Now I'll probably make a more in-depth video about handling connected content, but so you can understand what's going on here, here's a restaurant analogy that you'll probably never forget. Imagine you're at a restaurant and the waiter comes to take your order. Can I take your order, sir? The waiter is actually the connected content command in Braze, and you tell the waiter what you would like to order. I would like a steak with raspberry jus because I am very rich. The waiter then takes the order to the kitchen and tells the chef what the rich guy wants. This is the connected content taking your request to the server or whatever link you've put in there. The chef puts the food together, gives it back to the waiter, and the waiter brings it back and delivers it to your table. This is a connected content call. You tell the connected content call what you want, it takes it to the server and tells the server what you want, and then that's delivered back to you inside Braze. Now just a couple of minor notes here. Firstly, the waiter can actually go to the kitchen and find out what you ordered doesn't exist, and they will come back to you, but they'll come back to you with an error message. And secondly, even though the waiter may go to the kitchen and get your order and deliver it back to you, they don't tell you what to do with it once you receive it. It's still our job to choose to eat the meal with a knife and a fork, or maybe with our hands. How you use the connected content is completely up to you, but that's also what makes it so cool and so flexible. I use the Deck of Cards API for this video because it doesn't require any sort of login or authentication. It's really cool for messing around with and learning how connected content actually works. And it also has super clean written docs at deckofcardsapi.com. So over to the content block where the connected content call would look like this. The connected content tag lets Braze know you're making a connected content call. Following this, you add the URL you want to call. In our case, it's the Deck of Cards API with the word new here to say we want a new deck of cards every time we call it, and the number 4 at the end to say that we want 4 cards each time we call it. You can actually change the number at the end and request more cards at once if that's what you'd like. Next, we type :save to let Braze know we'd like to save the JSON file we get returned as a variable. And it's always useful to give these variables useful names. So I've called mine draw cards. Now for calling a public API, you can stop here and this connected content call would actually work. But Braze automatically caches the response instead of calling the API over and over again. Now this makes good sense if you're sending hundreds of emails that have the same content instead of repeatedly calling the API for each one. In our case, I want the cards to update every time I refresh the page, so I add :no_cache. You wouldn't use this all the time, this is actually just a very specific use case. And lastly, below this we'll write open double curly braces, draw cards, close double curly braces, so we can render the output of what's called. If we preview this now, you'll see a big pile of JSON will just smack you in the face, and for some of you this might be confronting. But instead of trying to untangle all of this today with a JSON formatter, the Deck of Cards API docs has already laid this out cleanly for us so we can see what's happening. So here in the Deck of Cards API, there's lots of options you can do, but the one we're using today is draw a card. Here you can see the link that we've put in already. We replaced deck ID with new and changed count to 4 so we get 4 cards. Now this is the response we saw in Braze a minute ago, laid out neatly so we can understand what's going on. This is a JSON file that's come back and it has all these objects inside it. Now the first one here is success equals true. We don't need that. Deck ID, every time you call a deck you get a new ID for that deck, and each deck has 52 cards in it. Next is cards, and inside cards is an open square bracket, which means we're now inside an array, and you can see the other one down here. So inside an array, we can have multiple objects that start at 0, and we have 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, for example, in our case for 4 cards, and each one will open with curly braces and close with curly braces. And inside there, we can see there's a code for the card. For example, it might be 6H for 6 of hearts. Underneath images, we can access an SVG of the image or a PNG of the image. We have the value, which is given a numerical value in this case, but in some cases it will say ace or king. And then we have the suit. And that's for each cards. And if we look down the next one, we get the same things again for the other card. And say if we had 4 cards, we'd get these repeated. And these all sit inside this array, so we can call all of those. And basically we would access that with our draw card variable that we've already created. And then I'll show you how to put in dots and square brackets to access each step of this as we go through. Although I'm going to briefly go over a bunch of liquid later, the main part here is this connected content call. And if you practice nothing else today, just keep practicing this bit, because that means you can access all sorts of things in the future. I'll also put a link below to the full code so you can look at that in more detail after the video. Now that we have our connected content call working and the template set up, we can start putting all our pieces in place. The most exciting part is actually getting the images to show, because a lot of people don't realize you can pull images from connected content. It's not just for pulling data and numbers and words. To do this, go to the first image box in our template, and in the URL, we're going to put liquid to tell it to use the image link that the Deck of Cards API gave us. I'll paste one in and explain it. Draw card tells it to look at the data we saved as draw cards from our connected content. This is what we saved inside our variable. If you called your variable something else, you would put that here first. Then we put dot cards to access the cards we saved, and you can see that over here on the Deck of Cards API if we go through that. The cards are saved in an array, and we want the first card in the array, and arrays start at 0. So we put square brackets and 0 to access the first item in that array. Now that we're inside the array, we want to select the image links by putting dot images, and then the PNG file by putting .png after this. And you can see we're slowly stepping our way down through this JSON file. This pulls the correct image link from the JSON file and displays that inside Braze. Now that we have one image working, we can easily get the other 4 working by copying and pasting this line of liquid and updating the array number. That will give us 4 images in total. Boom, 4 working card images with basically no liquid. That's pretty cool, hey? And if you update this, you'll see the cards update in real time because we put in that :no cache command in our connected content call. So every time we make the call, it's requesting 4 new cards from a new deck. If you didn't put the no cache command in, you may see that your cards remain the same every time you refresh the page, as Braze has cached these. Now, if you've gotten this far and got this working, the world is essentially your oyster, because not only can you call lots of cool things from this Deck of Cards API, it now opens up the world of public APIs where you can call whatever you want. If you just Google public APIs, you'll find all sorts of interesting things that you can test this on. I'd be interested to know in the comments if you got this working, if there's any other cool public APIs that you've discovered. Now we're going to flick over to the liquid in the content block so I can show you how the scoring works. It's a little more complex than just the connected content call. I'll just give you an overview at this stage, but feel free to check out the full code in the link below. And don't be too scared by this big slab of liquid. A lot of it is just cut and paste repeated because I had to. So right at the top here, we have our connected content call that we've already gone through. And then when it comes back, I've assigned each card to a variable. For example, card 1 is draw cards. That's what we save them in as a variable from the call. Dot cards, the first item in the array 0, and dot value. And if we look at the Deck of Cards API doc, you can see that will pull in the value for this card. And then I've assigned each card to its own variable here. Card 1, card 2, card 3, card 4. Now all the possible card values that can come in, I wrote into what I called card array. Go from 1 to 10, and then Jack, Queen, King, Ace. These are all the possible values. But I can't use Jack, Queen, King, and Ace to score anything. So what I did is I created another array of card variables which has the score for each of these cards. You can see it goes to 10, but Jack is given a 10, Queen is given a 10, King is given a 10, and then I gave the Ace 11. In Blackjack, the Ace could essentially be 1 or 11, but I kept this simple and made it 11 as the highest card. So every card now has a scored index, which we can work with to do scoring. So I have a for loop here, and this one is for card 1. So it's pulling in the value of card 1. Let's say it's the Jack, to use one of the strings. And it goes through the index here. It loops through this index until it lines up Jack with its index value, which in this case is 10. Then I create a new variable called card1 points, which equals card1 points, which is currently 0 because it's a new one, plus whatever that index value is. So it adds 10 onto card1 points. So card1 points now becomes 10. And later on when we do some maths, it knows that card was worth 10. And so this is how I allocate the strings to a value. All the other ones would just line up with their numbers. Now, each of these is just cut and paste loop. This does the same thing for card 2, for card 3, and card 4. I tried to put these into one smaller for loop, but it ended up just failing every time, so I left it. If it's working, don't break it. Once we've got those values, it says assign the player 1 total to the card 1 points that we created up here, plus the card 2 points that we created up here. Player 2 total, card 3 points, plus card 4 points. Then it actually knows who the winner is because it will actually be able to compare player 1 total versus player 2 total and work out which one is higher, because we're working in numbers now. Now, since we know who is the winner because we'll be able to determine this from who has the most points, I thought just to make it a bit more creative, I'd make the image of the dealer update depending on who the winner is. So I put a random number generator in here to pick a random image from 2 possible images for each use case. You could have numerous here if you wanted to, or none at all. You could have single images. So it says if the player 1 total, that we've determined here, is greater than the player 2 total, assign this image or assign this image. So it's randomly selected, and that would just be images saying that player 1 has won. Same thing, else if player 2 total is greater than player 1 total, assign some images saying that player 2 has won that are randomly selected from these 2 images. Or if the player 2 total equals the player 1 total, just show this image. Now this image for some reason isn't working perfectly every time. I don't know what's happening when the numbers are equal, but sometimes it doesn't work, and that's totally okay. But it's a good functioning MVP at this point. Now you notice there's quite a few for loops in there, and if you want to see a video looking at other use cases for for loops, you can check out my video here. But the important thing to take away from this video is how connected content works and the cool things you can do it, because getting the values and the images from that was actually the easy part. It was the looping and the scoring with Liquid that actually threw the spanner in the works in this whole process, because the cards just didn't come in with numerical values, which was an interesting challenge. If they did, half the code I wrote would actually be redundant because we wouldn't be needing to add an index to each item that came in. But I also wanted to show you just what's possible with Liquid alone, so that you know that you don't have to learn something like JavaScript to make really interesting and novel campaigns. It just takes some creative thinking and some problem solving. And now I'm just going to run this a few times to show you what this looks like when it's all running together. Actually, I'm going to challenge the dealer to 5 rounds and we're going to see who's the best.